Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 180 of the Citrix Session. My name is Bill Sutton. I'm your host for today. I have at least one extra person with me today, which we'll get to in a minute. But I'll obviously have Todd Smith and Geremy Meyers from Citrix. Todd, you want to say hello?
Bill, great to see you again.
Yep, like we were talking about on the last one, we're at 180, so hopefully we can get at least 20 more of these done between now and the end of the year so we can hit that magic 200 number. Right, Geremy? Geremy Meyers from Citrix is with us as well. You want to say hello?
Yeah, I mean, we how many weeks is that? It's 20 weeks. That represents what? Maybe 5 or 6 months. So by the end of the year, maybe we do like a Christmas episode, which is the 200th episode of the podcast. We do something
We can all
special.
wear funny Christmas hats, right? Or sweaters or something, right?
I'll be Uncle Eddie.
What's that?
I'll be Cousin Eddie.
And we have a special guest with us today that is driven largely by the topic for today, and his name is Phil Sellers. He's one of our business unit leaders at XenTegra. Phil, welcome to the podcast. If you don't mind, if you'd introduce yourself for our audience, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'm Phil Sellers. As Bill said, I get the privilege of running our data center practice at XenTegra, and so you'll see why I'm joining here in just a minute. But as a little bit of background, I come from the customer side, so have a lot of empathy for customers and their viewpoint, and so I always try to advocate for those viewpoints. But part of what I do here at XenTegra is oversee our relationship with all of our data center partners, including Nutanix. And so happy to be here and kind of talking about things. And it sounds like, guys, I've got some work to do to kind of catch up with you, because our Nutanix podcast just celebrated 100 episodes. So you guys are doubling down on me. We got some work to do.
Listen, you're catching up quick. At this rate, Todd and I we've had to miss a week here or there, so it won't be long until, if this was Mario Kart, you'd be throwing a turtle at us, just trying to throw us off course.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, congratulations on 100, Phil, for sure. And we've been doing it longer, so that's why we've got the higher numbers. But I don't know, like Geremy said, we've got to try to avoid the turtles, and the biggest issue for us is we got to come up with the content. There's blog articles aren't what they used to be. There's not as many of them. So, but this one is a good one that we're covering today, and hence why you're here. The blog article we're going to cover is entitled "Citrix and Nutanix Team Up to Simplify Virtual Desktop Management." It's written by Abhilash Verma. Hopefully, I didn't completely mess up.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah.
So the focus of this article is obviously Nutanix and Citrix relationship, which goes back a long time, probably not long after the initial formation or initial go-to-market of Nutanix. One of the key workloads I think they focused on back then was Citrix workloads, virtual desktop workloads. And virtual apps. I remember dating myself, and I don't know what year it was, but going to a Synergy conference. I think it was probably it was out west somewhere, either Vegas or San Francisco, and seeing this booth of this company I'd never heard of, a little small booth, and I didn't even know how to pronounce it, but I went over and talked to them, and they explained what they did, and it was fascinating. This concept of no 3-tier environments, no separate storage array. It was rather novel at the time, and of course, look where we've come, right, Phil? You want to give a little background on Nutanix generally before we jump into the detail?
Yeah, I mean, as you visited that little Nutanix booth as one of our
right.
Yeah, that's what he likes to call it on ours. It does get mispronounced a lot, but the mass has finally learned what this is, what the technology can do, and still today, it's a perfect use case for Nutanix technology to run VDI. There's secret sauce in the stack that makes it just fly for Citrix workloads, and so it's still one of the most common entry points for customers, and it's just a slam dunk when it comes to running infrastructure for VDI. So we're still helping a lot of customers in that use case, but there's a lot of expansion opportunity that's going on in the industry today too. And so we're happy to help expand those use cases because it's a great platform for everything anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Any comments
So
on
Phil,
that, guys? Yep.
yeah, before we get into the blog posts,
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions for, actually, you know what, just some comments. But, I remember when Nutanix was sort of first got mainstream, like I think the primary hypervisor was, I want to say VMware, like most of the deployments were VMware. And I can't remember how long ago this was when AHV, the Acropolis hypervisor, Nutanix's own hypervisor was introduced. But man, the pitch that I can remember one of the enterprise SEs told me is, listen, we're just making the hypervisor disappear. Like it's there, but you don't want to spend a whole lot of time managing a hypervisor. Like, what do you want to think about the workloads and what that looks like and how that's, sort of managed and extended at scale. But, if you're a VMware customer, you spend a lot of time thinking about ESX and vCenter and all these bits and pieces. Do you find, Phil, that most of your deployments, if not all, are all AHV? I mean, are we even talking about vSphere on?
Yeah, we still run into a few customers, but it is a minority at this point. And would you believe we just celebrated the 10th anniversary of AHV? So it's been 10 years in the making, but it is kind of that invisible part of the infrastructure now. Customers, what we like to say is customers, when you go to Azure AWS, you don't know or have any control of what the hypervisor is. It's just a transparent part of delivering the services, the virtual machines, the outcomes. And so Nutanix today is really trying to do the same thing. There's a lot of tailwinds based on the Broadcom acquisition, which are pushing more and more customers towards AHV. We've also seen the number of applications that aren't certified decrease to maybe enough that you could keep them on one hand, less than 5 of mainstream applications that won't run on the Nutanix AHV hypervisor at this point.
So we're probably splitting hairs here, but when you mean won't run, it's not that it won't run. It's just it's not officially supported by the vendor. Yeah.
Yeah. And Phil, I think you brought up a very interesting point. I think Geremy brought it up as well, is that, the hypervisor itself should be the invisible portion of it. It really comes down to two things. Number one is, can the application run on it, which goes to the certification conversation. But the other piece of it is it manageable and is it easy to administer the overall system? And I think the big groundbreaker that Nutanix brought to the market was the Prism management console, management layer, because you can actually not only manage the actual hypervisor as well as the storage and all of the other components associated with that, but you can also integrate it with your DAS platform, your VDI management tools, all of the other tools that people use to manage those guest virtual machines can all be managed through Prism, which I think it was kind of a groundbreaker for Nutanix when they introduced Prism.
So Phil, you said something that I'll be honest, I didn't realize it's been 10 years, but it's been 10 years. And I mean, I guess to bring this thing home to the blog post here, I mean, listen, Citrix's integration, whether it's the DAS service or even the on-prem CVAD product, I mean, we've integrated with AHV for a long time. We've integrated with Prism for a long time. We've been able to, essentially tap into AHV for deploying virtual apps and desktops and things like that. And, your architecture changes a little bit, I think, on Nutanix, because there's a couple of technologies on AHV that are pretty impressive. Like I want to call them shadow copy clones. Like we talk about MCS and we talk about PBS. At the end of the day, there's some secret sauce with Nutanix that you might not need those technologies because you can do it natively with AHV. But man, what is different? What did we just announce recently? I think at Next we went live with it, but what did we just announce?
Yeah, one of the huge ones is centralized cluster management. And so, previously, every Nutanix cluster basically had to be stitched up to your Citrix environment. And so there was no way of kind of handling scale. So that's one of the big things, that hybrid multi-cloud integration, so that Nutanix doesn't just run in a data center somewhere. It runs in hyperscalers. It runs in managed service providers. The same software is running in all sorts of different locations, providing true hybrid multi-cloud. And so there's enhancements around that from the Citrix partnership with Nutanix. You know, scaled image management is another part of that. You mentioned it, Geremy, but the ability to make those clones at zero cost quickly in Nutanix is a big part of the value proposition. It cuts down on all of the disk space that you need and makes it really optimized. And so what we're doing now is across those clusters, so back towards that scale, we're now making it possible to clone those master images that you use for Citrix across multiple different clusters and destinations. And so that's a big part of it, along with hypervisor flexibility. So those are the things that I think we'll touch on today.
Got it. So in the previous world, as in 6 months ago, it looked a lot like this. I've got a Citrix deployment. I've got a cluster, a Nutanix cluster sitting in data center 1. I've got another cluster sitting in data center 2. I've also got, and we'll get into Nutanix Cloud Clusters in a minute. Say that 3 times fast. But the idea that I've got these multiple clusters, from a Citrix perspective, I was probably tying up a connection to one, yet another connection to the next one, and then a third connection to maybe my hyperscaler. I guess what you're saying with Nutanix Cloud Central, I've got one spot that's got line of sight into every cluster everywhere, and now I can integrate directly with it. So now I've completely simplified. I've got a single tie-in to Nutanix from one spot, and from a Citrix perspective, I got line of sight wherever I need to deploy or replicate or anything. So it just greatly simplifies it.
It does. And I guess when we talk about Prism, there's a little nuance to this, right? On every Nutanix cluster, there's going to be Prism element. And so that's running native on the box for management. But then there's this construct of Prism Central, which is where almost like a vCenter-ish management platform. But inside of Prism Central, you can also run all of these additional services. And so you will see us manage files for a Citrix cluster for user data and profiles. That's running in a Prism Central. And now Nutanix Central is the manager of managers. And so you'll have a Prism Central in each of your data centers. It may have multiple clusters. Now this is rolling that all up into one centralized platform. And so that's a huge, huge step forward. And also, we have native support from Citrix to go against Prism Central. So you can do multiple clusters from Citrix to Nutanix Prism Central, which is a different layer to kind of enter and to manage your resources. So we've got 2 things really within that announcement.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So the other thing that is new for me, actually it's not new. I was at Next last year, so I'm lying a little bit, but I did see this last year for the first time, which is Nutanix Cloud Clusters. The idea that I can extend my Nutanix cluster to Azure, to AWS, and to GCP yet?
It's in public preview as of a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Got it. And what I'm running with Cloud Clusters is AHV natively on these hyperscalers. So I'm running HV on Azure, bare metal. I'm HV on AWS, bare metal. And in this preview, I can do that in GCP. So what are the implications of that?
Well, really, it's location. That's the first one for me. Is you don't have to stand up a new data center or co-location or a facility. You're able to leverage the facility of the hyperscale where they're located. So proximity to your facilities or your users, that becomes a huge part of the conversation. Secondarily, it's flexibility, where you're able on like an AWS to choose from multiple different node types. And so over time, you're able to upgrade those. You're able to move your clusters forward. And so you're able to mix and match what needs you have as a company in the makeup of the actual cluster you've deployed. So there's some limitations and technical things underneath the covers there, but it brings you that independence of hardware that you're no longer having to buy. You're basically just renting that from the hyperscale provider. And then lastly, it's the same. So the simplicity on-prem is the simplicity you're going to get in the cloud. So it manages the same way. You don't have to retrain your staff. You don't have to go through tons of additional concepts and things. Virtual machines are still virtual machines. You access them through Prism Central. You manage them the same way. You gain portability for things like DR and backups and things. You can replicate directly into a cloud cluster. It's the exact same software, just running in a different location. In this case, AWS or Amazon, Azure.
So, I mean, I think Todd and Bill tell you that, we think about customers who are running on-prem today, even if it's HV, right? They're not running cloud clusters yet, right? But then they're running in Amazon, they're running in Azure. I want to spin up a desktop. Guess what? It's a different image. There's either an Azure image or an AWS image, and I'm, potentially refactoring some things. But in this scenario, because it's the same hypervisor, I'm probably I'm just thinking about DR, any sort of business continuity. I'm just swinging things over, off I go. Or if I need extra capacity, I'm not building new images for my cloud. I'm using the same image I'm using on-prem, and I can easily move that out to the cloud if I needed to.
Yeah, and that got easier as part of this set of announcements we're talking about. That replication of the base image is now fully supported and automated. So it's an easier process for your administrators. But beyond that, we're thinking about image management. Think about all the other app data. Think about user data and things like that. We also have the ability to replicate Nutanix files and all of that user data between locations. There's improvements that are layered on if we need active. So there's solution set at hand to handle the full needs of a VDI stack. It's not just necessarily the VM hosting. It's 360.
Right. I mean, we forget about that, don't we, Todd? Somehow you want to move the profiles, you got to move them somehow, right? And
Absolutely.
Is DFS or RoboCopy the solution? Maybe not.
RoboCopy, that was what we used back in the day. I mean, you might as well bring up PlateSpin, my friend.
Todd, that was for you. That was a softball for you.
Yeah, the whole image management functionality, and we've got our own image portability service that can interact with this as well. And it really is. Hey, I've invested a lot of time and effort in building out my golden images. I need to be able to update them regardless of what platform I'm on. And this functionality from Nutanix certainly helps out considerably with this.
So I want to go back, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and I want to dumb this down, guys. That's just my role here. Basically, before this announcement, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but before this announcement, if I had a Citrix environment and I had multi-clusters, so I had multiple Nutanix clusters, one in one data center, one in another data center, or maybe even side by side in the same data center, it doesn't really matter. I literally had to have separate connections to each Prism element, correct? And
That's
now
right.
you've gone up at a higher level where you're managing, like you said, the manager of managers, right? And so now I connect to Prism Central, and essentially I have the ability to tie into all three of those clusters, and I can move things between them, potentially replicate things between them. And one of those clusters could be in NC2, correct? And the ability to manage that similarly, at least at this point.
So in theory, yes, to the last thing. So everything up to the very last point around cloud clusters, there's some limitations with cloud clusters and Prism Central. So what we would advocate from an architecture standpoint, we would keep each physical location on a separate PC or Prism Central.
Right.
And then, yes, everything else you said, you attach at Prism Central, you gain the portability to run pools and resources at the logical Citrix level. So your delivery groups and your machine catalogs, those map into multiple clusters. And so that's really the big thing is it helps us manage lifecycle, introduce additional capacity into a Citrix farm much more easily.
Good. All right. Well, there's another topic I want to touch on here. Any other things on Prism Central integration? Anybody else want to comment on Prism Central integration, or we beat that to death?
I mean, we beat it to life, Bill. That's what
Beat
we
it to
did.
life.
That's
Sorry.
that's good. No.
That's a better analogy. Yeah. More positive. So another part of this announcement was something that we knew was coming, and that was the ability to natively support NetScaler VPX on AHV. I think this had been kind of in a preview state for a while. We had a couple of customers that even kicked the tires on it, but the ability now to deploy VPX directly on AHV is now fully supported. Am I correct there, gentlemen?
You're correct. It's officially official.
Officially
It is
official.
officially official. So we've had customers doing, even before it was tech preview, we had customers who had sorted out
Yeah, that's
how
right.
to make it work.
Leveraging KVM, KVM copy, right? Yeah.
I mean, listen, we have customers who were migrating to a Nutanix data center. They wanted to retire all of their ESX hosts, and that was the one thing that was kind of holding them back. It was virtual instances of NetScaler, and so they would just go do it. And the tech preview came out, and it was sort of pseudo supported, but now it's gone GA, so that's something you can do. Full support.
Yeah. Very good. So I think that's really most of the article. The last section here just talks about the Citrix and Nutanix working together to enable customers to have better resiliency and management of their environments across clusters by leveraging Nutanix Prism Central. I knew before .next that something was coming. Didn't know what it was, but I'm sure Phil did. But nevertheless, this is a great announcement, particularly for customers that have multiple clusters, which quite frankly are a lot of them in the mid-market and above, because they've got multi-data center environments, right? So the ability to be able to orchestrate and manage workloads without having to create all these separate connections across the environment, I think is key. Any final thoughts or comments? I'll start at the top, Todd.
Yeah, so I think this is a pretty strong long-term partnership, and not only between Citrix and Nutanix, but also XenTegra in the middle of this. There is some complexity that a lot of customers are trying to solve for.
Yeah.
And it comes with a solid understanding of how the products from both companies work, but also how to integrate them together. And in some cases, it requires some thoughtful design into, how do we make things work better, more efficiently, and give a better experience, not only for the users, but also for the administrators that are taking care of this on a daily basis.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Leveraging partners like yourselves is absolutely critical to this successful recipe.
Yeah, and in addition to our rock solid EUC Citrix practice, we got a rock solid data center practice with Phil at the helm for sure. So kudos there. Geremy, any final thoughts from you?
I mean, listen, I don't get paid for selling Nutanix, right? And the Citrix story is very much hybrid. You can run in a data center, different hypervisors in a cloud, so on and so forth. But to be honest, like Nutanix, anytime I walk into a customer situation, they're running Citrix and Nutanix, I'm just like, all right, you guys have the easy button. It really is super, super simple, and I can't overstate that. So if you have not looked at Citrix on Nutanix, you should. And this is coming from someone, by the way, who doesn't get paid. I did not get a lunch for this, but it's always fun to walk into because it really is the easy button.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Phil, final thoughts?
Well, Geremy stole my analogy, so I was going to talk about staples and the easy button, but yeah, it is really true. Just to underscore that, when I talk to customers who aren't familiar with Nutanix, I tell them three things. Nutanix is a company that's built infrastructure that's meant to be simple, it's meant to give you choice, and it's meant to be performant. And so it checks the box on all three of those. You need great performance to run VDI, but if you're looking for a simplified, no finger pointing, orchestrated day one, orchestrated day 100, that's what Nutanix is going to give you. And that's part of the value prop. It's around giving back cycles to your administrators, making sure things are steady and solid, and they deliver on those points. So that's why we lead with that for our VDI customers, and most of our data center I would say 99% of our data center operations too. If it's any endorsement at all, our managed services practice here at XenTegra is built on Nutanix.
Yeah.
That's not a recent thing. We've been that way for the last 5 years. All of the different managed services, like our managed Citrix desktops, those are built and delivered on Nutanix. So we believe it is a platform for not only that, but for all different workloads for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Phil. So what I'd say at the end here is, obviously, if you're listening to this and you need help with Citrix, or you need help with Nutanix or data center, or you need help with Citrix and Nutanix, please feel free to reach out to your friendly XenTegra client executive or one of us on this call, and we can definitely help you. So I'll take the ad hat off now. So but had to do the endorsement there. That's all we got for today, folks. Any other final thoughts from any of you before we adjourn?
Philip, it's good to see you on here. So
Yeah.
happy 100. We'll bring you back for the Citrix 200. How about that?
That would be great. I'd love a guest spot on that one. Thank you for inviting me in. We do a lot of great work together. This is a great partnership, and I mean that across the Nutanix and Citrix, the XenTegra and Citrix, XenTegra and Nutanix, me and Bill. Like our teams, that's the heart of what we've got here, is just a really strong partnership across it all. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Well, I appreciate that, Phil. It's a pleasure having you with us, and thanks for all of your input. All right, folks, have a good evening or a good day. Sorry. And or maybe you're listening to this in the evening, so maybe that is appropriate. Nevertheless, have a good rest of the week or whatever, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, Bill.
guys.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Todd.